I give the floor now to Fabienne Goutille, University of Bordeaux. Fabienne is a researcher and social scientist with La Fabrique RGO, a research engineer with the INSERM Epicen team and an associate with INRA ETIS unit. A doctoral thesis proposes a construction of pesticide risk prevention that takes into account the concern of working people in occupational health policies in the form of extended research communities. The aim of her work is to improve the living and working conditions of professionals by developing their personal and collective power to act. So Fabienne, you have the floor for 15 minutes.
Hi everybody, I'm Fabienne Goutille. I prepared this presentation with Alan Garrigou. We are ergonomics researcher and professor. My point today will be about the critical approach of the role of personal protective equipment, the PPE, in pesticide resistance. Okay, so in France, the health consequences of agricultural pesticides exposure have grown an increasing concern and become a sensitive and political and media issue. Several public reports like the National Institute of Health and Medical Research, National Agency for Food, Environmental and Occupational Health and Safety, calling ANSES, and National Institute of Health and Medical Research shown that high likelihood that these pesticides contribute to the appearance of several neurological illness, cancers like Parkinson's disease, prostate cancer, malignant non-Hodgkin lymphoma, including multiple myeloma. And in this context, the personal protective equipment, the PPE, is central in discussion of chemical risk prevention in agriculture. Sorry, I have to do one thing like this. From the ANSES, so from one agency report that that some colleague prepare, and to the safety science public. Sorry, it's not working. Okay. So this report at the left of the screen is about the occupational exposure to pesticide in agriculture. The main of this report is to better understand and reduce exposure in the context where the available data are currently often lacking, and is documenting exposure inside the real work. After this report, with some colleagues, international colleagues from France, Brazil, Canada, we prepare, and multidisciplinary, or also economics, ergonomics, epidemiologists, we prepare this article that you can find in Safety Science about the critical review of the role of PPE in the prevention of risk related to the agricultural pesticide of use. It's what is inside this article and how we prepare it that I will explain to you today. Just to have a view of what is PPE, I put this this figure, this pictures of some of the 30 kind of model we can find in the French market in agricultural use. So 3 points I will to defend today: the place of PPE in prevention, that one of the fundamental principles of the occupational health and safety is that PPE should be considered as the last line of defense after other measures have been taken, after replace the risk, after having done many things. It will be the last line. And ILO, International Labour Organization, show that, and a European directive take it also. And PPE is not the same that collective protection, that you will use some, not the same thing to the body of the person. So collective protection system should be put in place before PPE. The second point is that wearing PPE central to marketing authorization procedure. If the exposure level estimate that with model is greater than the acceptable operator exposure level, the models that we use to register pesticide predictively consider that the estimated exposure value could be reduced by wearing PPE. When data on the protection provided by PPE is lacking, the European Food Safety Authority recommends using default values, in this case, considering that coveralls lets through a maximum of 5 or 10% of the product to which users are exposed. I let you have a look of this EFSA guidance, where you will see how okay, we sorry. I let you just have a look, and you can find it online also. The first point is about the exposure modelization. That here, the pictures that you have is the field studies where PPE wearing practices were uncontrolled, means that the choice of the PPE or whether to use any at all was not imposed to the agriculture. But, sorry, it's not working. And I have this bar that avoid me to, okay. So all the report and for the registration, the field study in which PPE wearing practices are controlled, requiring that the particular kind of PPE be worn. Here on the left, you can see that how this man is what he's wearing, and also personal clothes. To have a look inside the cube to prepare pesticide, you need to have some information. And on the left, on the right side, you can see an agricultor on site the tractor, the sprayer to intervene during spraying, because you cannot regulate the sprayer without going on during the spraying. Okay. Here. And here, this figure represents the median contamination and the distribution. The most striking finding is the large overlap in the distribution of contamination values for people wearing protective clothing and who did not. Thus, in some cases, these people wearing clothes could have higher contamination than people not wearing it. Data processing therefore leads to several considerations. Wearing protection clothing does not completely prevent contamination, and during the preparation phase, wearing a suit partially limits contamination, but does not completely prevent it. And also during the treatment and cleaning phases, people who wore coveralls were generally more contaminated than who did not. So external contamination in relation to whether coveralls are worn. Sorry for this interruption. Assessment of PPE effectiveness in field study in which PPE wearing practices are uncontrolled or partially controlled. The coveralls typically recommended by prevention organizations are not to be tested for resistance to permeation by the pesticide being used, which explains how some products migrate through the coverall, some within 10 minutes. The products used to test the coverall resistant to permeation were acids and bases commonly used in industry. They matched products that the norm suggests for PPE testing, but do not respond to the characteristic of pesticide on the market. I propose this discussion, the possibility of having PPE that is comfortable, suitable to practical condition, affordable, and protects from contamination by any and all handled products has yet to be demonstrated. Numerous studies have found significant gaps between the ideal theoretical model that I presented before and the reality of work and of our workers. There is no mechanism allowing systematic monitoring of the feasibility and actual effectiveness in the post-marketing conditions of the protection provided by PPE as they are postulated in marketing authorization procedures. Data is still incomplete, fragmentary, and scattered. Also, studies in which PPE wearing practices are uncontrolled, PPE does not always fulfill the protective role attributed to it in the marketing authorization procedures, in the registration. There is many determinants that could influence the efficiency of recommendation based on PPE use. In this, it is essential that evaluation of this efficiency include the full range of active use conditions, people concerned, and actual practices. Advances in toxicology on the effect of the low doses and development in chemical technologies with the emergence of the nanomaterials inside the pesticide, inside the product, call for a radical re-examination of the role that PPE can play in preventing chemical risk. Conclusion. PPE's protective abilities are overestimated in the marketing authorization process or during prevention intervention. Exposure scenarios should take full account of the difficulties that could potentially be encountered in the real use in the field, for example. That kind of lessons for preventing pesticide exposure in the context of climate change is the question I ask it to you. And I prepared just 3 pictures because I think I have time. You confirm to me just 3 pictures, or
Yes, you can, Fabienne.
Okay.
Yeah.
So some reason of the non-use of PPE by agriculture is not that they are just ignorant. Is not the point. Field observation, even in OECD countries, show that the actual wearing of PPE is well below stipulated recommendation. Although it is variety according to type of the task. Poverty, which come with greater subordination of work and make it more difficult to demand that the employer provide them with adequate training and PPE. Because before we see just agriculturals, owners of the farm, but also you have some salary, some migrant doing this kind of work and having to be protected during the use of pesticide. The role of employers and the nature of working relationships, non-use of PPE in agriculture may be interpreted as a resulting in part from very different risk aversion profile. And last slide about the potential user complaint of several characteristics of PPE, thermal and mechanical discomfort. Many times you cannot see well what you are doing when you use this thing, and you are stressed, and also you have to wear a thing with the sun, etc. Negative image also with the neighborhood of PPE among neighboring non-farming population, and burden and significant expense of respecting all instruction for use. Here, the last photo, I was talking to you before about the sun and what you can do when it's very uncomfortable, and when you have it, it's so high because you are drying on the sun. Sorry, thank you.
Thank you very much, Fabienne. And it's really concerning when you said that sometimes wearing PPE is more dangerous than not wearing it, and also the fact that sometimes the legislation is using PPE as a market access for hazardous pesticides. So it's really something that we have to have in mind when we discuss about this in the regulation.